warrior. There is obviously the rogue as well on that side, so I'm pretty shocked. I think I would have assumed it would have been any of the other classes except Paladin that would have been banned out. So we'll have to see how that one turns out, but we are going to be kicking it off now. Game number 1, okasinnsuke with the priest on the top and the Xiao Bai on the bottom with this warrior. And already these opening mulligans look a little bit spicy, at least on the top for me, Gia.
Oh yes, the Zephyrus early on is always something you like to see as Priest. Holy Smite also can get some work done against, I would normally say not against Warrior, but this version of Xiao Bai includes cards such as the Bomb Wrangler, which Holy Smite is a nice one-card solution to that. And Cabal Acolyte has quite a few good steal targets, like what I said in the Bomb Wrangler and also Sword Eater. It's just the thing that if you keep both of those, it can look like a very reactive hand, and okasinnsuke might end up actually using Zephyrus for a proactive solution in the early game in that case. So it's a bit difficult to parse how proactive he wants to be versus reactive, but I wouldn't mind keeping all 3 cards on the left.
It's tough, isn't it? It's like there are some really good puzzle pieces there, but if you keep them all, they're not all to the same puzzle some of the time. Right. So it can be just a little bit tricky. He's going to do the far left, the 3 far left, sorry, with the keep, and gets rewarded with a Soul Mirror as his new card. But looking at the bottom here for Xiao Bai, again, not the most amazing opening hand here, but for me, this is where things get interesting. There are options now, because of this hand, to go, say, Bomb Wrangler, and then in a rage early on to maybe try and get duplicates from Bloodsworn Mercenary. Of course, we can see Holy Smite is there to answer, but I think we'll get a pretty good idea pretty quickly on how Xiao Bai is going to approach this matchup based on what he does with this Bomb Wrangler.
Right. The hand doesn't provide him that much flexibility, honestly. He did not pick up card draw other than Battle Rage, which is really hard to activate at the moment. So we could just see the Bomb Wrangler either naked on the board or with an Inner Rage thrown onto it already. He has a solid read on Wild Growth being what okasinnsuke wants to play next turn, so I don't necessarily see him committing to Inner Rage here, and he does just play it on its own. If the Zephyrus trades, then Xiao Bai feels a little bit bad. If it doesn't, though, he gets to Inner Rage and copy.
Right, and with this Wild Growth, it's pretty much guaranteed. Was there any thought in going coin Holy Smite, or do you think that is way too much of a, an investment in the coin there for this matchup?
Yeah, I do think it's quite expensive because the coin is sometimes going to help him activate the Cabal Acolyte in a good way. For example, now he can go... actually, he didn't need the coin in this situation, but rather Soul Mirror early on. That's something he used the coin for. And Zephyrus as a body is, I wouldn't say, all too relevant here, but the Cabal Acolyte with Holy Smite on the bomb guarantees okasinnsuke a steal on one of the Armor Smiths, which is very, very relevant.
It really is, isn't it? And anything to remove the board away from Xiao Bai, I think, is going to be good here for okasinnsuke, because there must be, with this play, this is not a good play from Xiao Bai, or this is not a play you would normally want to do as the warrior. So there might be even some level of read that, like, he's looking for something to do.
Wait a minute. The bomb killed the Cabal Acolyte before the spell burst could go out. That was so unlikely. That's a 1 in 8 outcome for that to happen.
The difference between that bomb hitting and not is absurd. Look at this turn. Xiao Bai is just back in the game now.
And okasinnsuke will be happy that he held onto this coin for a Soul Mirror, because this is a panic button right here. Xiao Bai had a small decision as to whether he wanted to commit second Inner Rage to get a bigger Battle Rage, but it's kind of valuable as a combo piece later on, so I like him just sticking to the double card draw here.
Yeah, that could have gone very, very wrong for okasinnsuke there, because if there wasn't that Soul Mirror, he is so far behind. Xiao Bai now would really like to get hold of that weapon for that cutting class, but still has some reasonable options, at least with the Warmaul Challenger.
Yeah, I mean, it does give okasinnsuke yet more armor, but I think it's quickly become clear that this is not one of those games where Warrior tries to smack you in the head with the weapons. It is very much a battle for board control. So Xiao Bai is happy to carry on here, wait for Reaper Scythe / any other weapon, and try to get that cutting class going while he searches for Grom.
Yeah, at this point in the game, as soon as that Soul Mirror came down, Xiao Bai just knows there's no big rush here. He just has to try and find those combo pieces.
Cobalt Spellkin, filling in the mana nicely, corrupts the insight, so Okashinsuke can keep drawing. It is a little bit scary to leave up the Warmaul Challenger because every time that happens, it feels like they get the Shield of Honor into copy, but he has seen one Bloodsworn already, so and he's also just very healthy.
If there's an Inner Rage available for okasinnsuke at some point in this game, that combo with Inner Fire is absurd.
That is pretty sweet. I mean,
I guess he won't need it. That's two separate combos in the roundabout way, but still, having that flexibility is actually insane.
Yeah. So it's either he finds an Enrage mechanic for the Grom so he can put the Shield of Honor on it, or he just goes Grom Inner Fire, and that's already 9 attack on the Grom with charge. And he can get the Inner Rage if he goes Madame Lazul right now. But of course, we're getting a little carried away. Okashinsuke's first priority will definitely be just dealing with this board. I still think there's room for Madame Lazul in that equation, but maybe the Karj comes down as well.
Yeah, he looks pretty okay here on Priest side because he can kill off the Armor Smith in a very straightforward fashion, right? You just trade it with 5. Wait, he's going... Oh, okay.
All right. I mean, this is also just maximum board presence, right? And it looks like he's targeting the Warmaul, get the highest health minion out of the way before it can possibly get hit with a Shield of Honor. I like the line from Okashinsuke. He's not getting baited by the big combo potential. The Grom presents such a big individual problem for Xiao Bai right now, and Okashinsuke later can still get some good use out of his Madame Lazul, and also a very tasty pawn reading, given how many spells in hand.
And there's not actually a good answer to this, is there?
There isn't.
Like, Grom in a rage trade?
Oh...
What now?
So, Risky Skipper, South Sea Captain would deal 1, buff it to 2, so that's 3, 4. It's nowhere near enough, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem,
It might be something like just Grom into the Cobalt instead and say, if you have your Shadow Word Death, GG. It was fun. And that is what he's going to go for. And even though it's not necessarily Shadow Word Death, there is Karj to put on the other Grom. And he can Divine Shield up this current Grom.
Yeah. Yeah, even if this turn was just Shield of Honor trade Groms, that's still a fantastic turn. And he can do more than that. So, Reborn... Oh, I thought he was going to go Reborn for the Grom as well. Oh. I'm getting too deep into this, honestly. This is
All the
why I
Grom
lose
combos.
games of Hearthstone on ladder.
But you get to have some very fun times doing broken things with priest cards. I mean, we could get really fancy here. We could go like Karj on the other Grom and immediately pain your Karj. But I guess there's not much use for the immediate Grom.
I mean, it could trade the Armor Smith.
True. Maybe that is the line. As long as the Shield of Honor comes down on the current Grom and takes the value trade, Okashinsuke is sitting pretty.
I was even looking at just quickly if there was like a weird Inner Fire on the enemy Grom, to reduce its attack down, and maybe that does something, but there's nothing quite there to make it worthwhile. Well, there's the Shield of Honor trade. Like I said, I think if only that happened that turn, then it's a fine turn.
Yep. This turn is still good.
Yeah. There's just casually 2 Skeletal Dragons in hand as well, because why not?
No shortage of value whatsoever. Xiao Bai, with the draw of Bomb Wrangler, can start, detonating a lot of bombs along with Risky Skipper and the Bloodsworn Mercenary, but it honestly feels like not enough. There's a Grom inside the Karj, and the Grom that's still alive has a lot of health on it, and Xiao Bai's nowhere near trying to aggro down Okashinsuke.
Yeah, honestly, at this point in the game, if I was Xiao Bai, I would be sat there thinking, how do I even win this game? Because one Bloodsworn Mercenary has already been used, the Grom's already gone and not really achieved anything, and so there's one Korkron combo he can do with Bloodsworn, and that's it. And my opponent's on more than 30 health right now. So this is going to be, I think an uphill climb would be probably a little bit generous to say at this point.
It is really not looking good. Xiao Bai instead goes for the end card, trying to thin his deck towards... I am honestly not sure. Maybe Shield of Honor can get some stuff done with the Bomb Wrangler, but he's clearly saying, I need my full mana to work with to try and detonate the most bombs for the next turn. It's a Hail Mary, but it's the best he's got.
Yeah, I also think he might be looking for Lord Barov, for example, to clear the board up. Also, as well, if he gets towards the one Korkron and the Reaper Scythe, that is a lot of damage because he still has the Bloodsworn Mercenary, so he can, push a certain amount of burst damage he can set up with the weapon. But yeah, I do think this is definitely just full desperation here from Xiao Bai.
Yeah. And funny enough, he himself is on a clock because of the Grom from Okashinsuke. Now it's going to be protected by a taunt as well, and the Armor Smith is going to get value traded down by the Karj.
It's just all going wrong, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Is he trading? That's an illegal trade. Oh, it hurts my soul. But Okashinsuke is probably saying, I have no way of losing if I just play control from here on out. I mean, I get the thinking behind it, but it could be a long day, man. You could end the game sooner.
Yeah, and it's starting to get to that point that even the dream scenarios here just aren't going to happen because they're not happening fast enough, right? And we can see, of course, Skeletal Dragon number 2's there. There's plenty of heal to re-heal the taunts up. It doesn't even have to go into Okashinsuke's face. So there's just all the options in the world here to outlast him. Obviously, Xiao Bai doesn't exactly know what's in hand for his opponent, but still, I think this pretty much had to be like perfect draw after perfect draw for him to have any kind of chance.
Honestly, my headspace is just at how can Okashinsuke deal lethal as soon as possible. And I was already looking for something crazy like inner firing your opponent's minion, I guess before this buffed up Sword Eater came into play, so he can pop the Karj and then he can go Pyro plus another spell to enrage both Groms. But given that Okashinsuke traded his 12 attack Grom into a 1 attack minion last turn, I don't think he'll be in any rush whatsoever.
Yeah, I think
but please do it.
It would be cool, but I think he is just taking the approach to just systematically delete any win condition that Xiao Bai has.
I mean, surely the fresh Grom is far enough from being cleared by any risky skippers that it still deletes any win condition, right?
Yeah, I guess you can delete the ultimate win condition that is killing your opponent first is a good way to stop them beating you.
All right, all right. Can still do it. After the card trades down, he can go like Pyro plus 2 spells and reach the second Grom. Okay, this order was strange. If you really wanted to maximize the value out of everything, I believe it was cards trade first before the Holy Nova.
Yeah, it was the card damaged?
It was not.
Oh, right. But I was just going to say, even if it was pre-damaged, he could have hero powered it first, right? Then traded, then Nova'd after the attack with the Grom. So yeah, we are getting into weird spaces where we're discussing things that almost certainly just don't matter. But at least now the Barov is there, so Xiao Bai can start to clear away these Groms. Something I didn't think I'd be saying today.
Obviously, Okashinsuke did not do anything that I wished he did because he wanted to make sure he had that second layer of protection. The Grom pops out after the Karj is dealt with as his insurance against Xiao Bai is pretty much one way of dealing the board in Lord Barov. And now Okashinsuke can have a lot of fun with this Grom for sure.
I'll show you who's boss!
Nice timing on the Zeraku while there are boom bots to explode. So he can possibly summon a minion off of that. None of them hit his face, but honestly, not a big deal whatsoever.
Yeah, there's the benefit of it just having 12 health and being a good tank anyway, right? Just being able to soak up some boom bots, but of course he would have liked maybe an extra 6/6 on the board.
I would have liked it. to end the game sooner.
Here the decisions on the renew target. Soul Mirror being taken as, again, overkill at this point, but probably just it's never too bad to have a Soul Mirror in hand as a backup. More often than not board clear. But again, just look at the hand. I'm getting to the point now where I'm surprised there's no concede because there's no Korkron, even though it's only 8 cards left in the deck. But there isn't 8 cards worth of time in this game at this point, right? And even the Korkron combo doesn't get there because it isn't, say, the double mercenary version.
True, he has used 1 mercenary. Even if he gets the Korkron right off the top, that would be 9 attack with the Inner Rage and Shield of Honor copied into 18. I guess with the coupled with the weapon, 23 is a lot in 1 turn, but okasinnsuke is at 31, and Xiao Bai is simply not going to have the time to deal that extra 8. And even if he does try to do it incrementally, the fact that okasinnsuke is priest means that he gets to delete at least 2 of that damage by hero powering every turn.
Also, the fact that he has the Zeraku on board means that if he tries to do it incrementally, he will just die quicker. So it's just a kind of lose-lose situation here for Xiao Bai.
Truly is. okasinnsuke finally going on the aggressive here because the only thing he was worried about prior to this was the Barov. Now that it's been used, he is very free to set up as fast of a lethal as he can. And there you have it from Xiao Bai. The concede comes out almost like a foregone conclusion towards the midpoint of that game, but sometimes Grom stolen by Priest can do that.
Yeah, that was one of those just very strange games, which is not how the matchup normally goes, of course. But I wouldn't even take anything away from Xiao Bai for sticking around in that game, because if his draws were something along the lines of back-to-back, like Reaper, Scythe, Equip, Swing into Korkron, into Shield of Honor combo, there were chances a little bit earlier on in the game. And of course, for want of a few minutes, when your tournament life is on the line, you take those and you play it till the end. So full respect for that one, but it is going to be okasinnsuke just being 1-0 ahead now and having a win with that Priest, which, again, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like every lineup I see, I'm always like, oh, the Priest might be the weak one in this lineup. So it's always good to see for that player that, the Priest getting a win nice and early in the series.
Right, and I'm glad that highlight is reminding us just how clutch that initial Soul Mirror was. If that were not there, okasinnsuke was facing a whole world of problems after that disastrous boom bot killing off the Cabal Acolyte before it could even get its spell burst done. But a lot of the time, that's how it goes with Priest, especially Highlander Priest. It takes one perfect card to turn the corner, and from there, it is smooth sailing.
And also, the sheer volume of armor that he gained from that Soul Mirror meant that the sort of hit a couple of times in the face, as you can even see there. One swing of that 5 damage weapon took nearly all the armor off, but if there was no armor, suddenly that out is way more possible because the Korkron draw makes it happen. So even just not only the Soul Mirror helping clear the board, but the armor gain from that, absolutely huge when you're against some kind of burst combo deck, because Priest doesn't normally have access to that kind of armor. So really big deal there. And, the game 1 is over so far, but still plenty to play for Xiao Bai, and still plenty of time for him to come back in this series.
Indeed. I do think, though, that Xiao Bai has to be sweating at least a little bit because that Priest seemed like it was the soft target for at least his Zoo Warlock, and in my opinion, also the Warrior. We can see that Xiao Bai went for the non-standard ban on the Paladin because he is specifically playing all these aggressive decks that have a hard time dealing with big taunts against a single Libram of Hope, for example, which is, I believe, his main reasoning for getting rid of a deck that has kind of underperformed against other lineups. He does have now against a match against okasinnsuke's own Warrior, which is not quite as aggressive. It has the Rattlegore on the top end there, but also has ETC God of Metal for some burst towards the end.
Yeah, and I think, at least in my experience, it has surprised me how early you can actually get ETC to death, depending on how much damage is pushed early, and also if there's already minions on the board, you might not have to go for some kind of, the double duplicate on the ETC. So even just its potential to just throw out some level of burst, even if it's just like, I don't know, like 10 damage and not like crazy numbers, it can still just end the game out of nowhere. And there's not a lot of preparation or things you can do about it as the opponent to stop it happening. Because I think me and Lorinda were talking about this earlier, is like, just don't play minions just isn't really a valid answer. You see that, you know, in chats it's like, oh, why would you play a minion into ETC Warrior when they've got combo? It's like, well, you don't know they've got combo, and two, most decks can't just not play minions. It's kind of the game. So yeah, very, very difficult, but we are going to get, I guess, the half mirror match for our game number 2, with one player obviously taking that ETC approach and the other one taking a bit more of an aggro-based high burst with the Grommash that we saw from last game.
Right. I do think that the longer the game goes, the more it would tilt in the favor of Okashinsuke, because if he's able to land a Rattlegore safely, oftentimes that is the win condition against other warriors, because they simply do not have a way of dealing with it. And if it's not dealt with, it often gets copied, and it presents a very quick clock for the opponent. However, Xiao Bai has the Grom, like you were saying, and the Korkron Elite, so his burst can potentially come together sooner. But I would say that the most important thing in this matchup is who gets control of the early board, who lands their Warmal challengers, who gets to buff them and possibly even copy them and take all the value trades. And in Xiao Bai's case, he also has Bomb Wrangler as one of those early threatening minions. So on average, I feel like Xiao Bai should get the early board more consistently, but we do see Okashinsuke is the one who has the good 3-drops.
That's it, isn't it? The theoretical, you know, how the deck lists do play out often isn't always the case, as we could see that Quartermaster and the Warmal Challenger down, or at least available nice and early for Okashinsuke. So this is looking really, really strong. The saving grace, I guess, for Xiao Bai is that he does have now access to a Sword Eater, not quite yet, but it is just a solid minion to help chunk down some of these bigger Warmal Challengers.
Oh, and look at this top deck and how rewarded Okashinsuke is by already loading up his Warmal Challenger with the Inner Rage. You can see that he's known this matchup for a very, very long time, even in the oldest iterations of Pain Warrior. In the mirror, first person to get down Warmal Challenger, often in a great spot. If you can immediately buff its attack, it's great because the opponent can't respond with their own Warmal Challenger. And Xiao Bai immediately respecting that with a resource as big as Lord Barov.
Yeah, and this is something I was going to suggest, but obviously Xiao Bai made that decision very quickly. You know, do you like this from him? And this is a big sort of payment to make to deal with one Warmal Challenger, but do you think this is the correct level of respect?
I definitely think so, yeah, because Xiao Bai's entire game plan, like I said in the beginning, is highly dependent on him getting the early board. As it stood, he didn't even have, say, Risky Skipper to pair with Lord Barov, so in most cases in the near future, the Barov was only ever clearing one minion, so why not use it on Okashinsuke's highly invested in minion, and on top of that, preserve the Barov as a body on board. It's expensive because he loses the Inner Rage, but he has a good enough follow-up curve to justify it, and now we can see Xiao Bai starting his counter-offensive, whereas Okashinsuke has to find a solution for himself.
Yeah, this is looking good now if we just look at Xiao Bai's hand. The Corsair Cash and Cutting Class, that is a ton of resources to just keep on top here. And the onus is definitely on Okashinsuke to fight back, and that just doesn't even really look possible this turn. It's like he can just cobble down the Barov just to remove the damage from it, but it definitely doesn't feel great, does it?
Not at all. I could see a world where Okashinsuke armors up and passes here because maybe he wants to wait for a board state where he can kind of manipulate Xiao Bai's Barov into discounting his own Blood Boil Brute. But it is a lot of damage to take across a couple of turns, so he's going to pull the trigger on the Barov for now and hopefully get the Blood Boil down in 2 turns anyway. Okay, I'm definitely liking the look of Corsair Cash, which will, I believe, guaranteed... Oh, sorry, it's between Anchor or the Reaper's Scythe. So depending on what weapon he gets, I think that'll inform his decision of whether to swing with the current weapon. But I do like getting the Warmal Challenger down this turn, no matter which of the card draw options he takes. Yeah.
There's the max card draw, which is Corsair Cash into Cutting Class, and you'd Corsair first, obviously, to guarantee the weapon. But you can also go halfway and just play the Warmal Challenger. My only worry about that is, without seeing the draw first, which is why I imagine it is going to be Cutting Class, it's difficult to just play a Warmal Challenger because it is a threat, but there's 0 ways to buff it right now in Xiao Bai's hand. So
True.
it's definitely just, I guess its bark is worse than its bite at this moment in the game. As it could be a danger for okasinnsuke, but we know that it's going to be pretty meager for a while.
And Xiao Bai actually takes the other option that I initially thought was least likely, which is going for the non-tutored card draw, the cutting class while it is cheap, and plays down the Warmall Challenger. And I think this is just respecting the possibility that the Corsair Cash gets him Ankar, which is really slow and counterintuitive to his game plan at the moment, which is try and find buff for the Warmall Challenger. With the top deck of Ankar, he's guaranteed to get the bigger weapon off of the Corsair Cash now, though. So we could see the Reaper Scythe put in some big work in the near future. He's going to start with Ankar, though, and try to draw his other Sword Eater.
Yeah, I think here, I like this because the Reaper's Scythe is a weapon you want to equip when, one, you might need to clear a board, right, to have the spell burst effect for the cleave. But for me, it's the weapon you equip to end the game, right? So especially now, the 3 swings will be like a 3 turns worth of setup to get your opponent at the right health to then burst them down. So I do like him going this order, actually, and not just going, well, Reaper's Scythe is the biggest weapon, I'm going to equip it now and start swinging.
He takes a little bit of a slower approach to guarantee that he can offset the value that he lost, quote-unquote, by playing cutting class preemptively. Bloodboil Brute is the obvious answer here from Xiao Bai, and he can deal with the rest of this Bloodboil Brute by, I guess, Skipper, Warmall, and then Shield of Honor, the first Warmall.
I'll show you who's boss.
Alternatively, we could see Korkron Elite, and then Battle Rage, and then he trades the Korkron.
You could just Skyraid the Warmall Challenger, right, as well.
True, true. Yeah, this way, by using the cheaper activation on the Skipper, he gets to fit in the Battle Rage as well, which is definitely high priority.
And now more options. Bloodboil Brute available now. Also that one of those Bomb Wranglers could be played this turn to, again, not necessarily now kill the Bloodboil Brute, but go so wide on the board that okasinnsuke has to respect it and respond.
Little bit of greed here from Xiao Bai by not immediately clearing off the Bloodboil, but I think given the way he saved both the Korkron and the Shield of Honor, he really wants to just have the maximum amount of burst in his hand available. And he knows that the 5-2 on the other side is not too threatening quite yet, and instead the Bomb Wrangler makes almost all of okasinnsuke's trades awkward.
Right.
So we could see a Skipper Armorsmith turn, but it pops the Bomb Wrangler a little bit more, so it might even be correct to start with second Bloodboil Brute.
Yeah, I'm wondering how much okasinnsuke is thinking about that Cabal Acolyte earlier on with the bomb. Killing it. It's like, oh, if I play Armorsmith, does it just get one shot?
That would be pretty disastrous.
It is important to know as well that even though Xiao Bai has been having a really strong few turns, okasinnsuke doesn't have to rush too quickly, right? He doesn't have to go crazy right now. He just needs to do enough to stay in control of the game.
I'll show you who's boss.
okasinnsuke takes a very, very unpleasant looking trade in order to make sure that he saves the most health on his remaining Bloodboil Brute. We could have seen him go fresh Bloodboil Brute into the 2-2, and then the other Bloodboil Brute into the Warmall Challenger. But then the Warmall would have still stayed alive, and he would have had, I think, less health on the other Bloodboil Brute, so it's slightly optimized there.
And I think now is the time to equip the Reaper's Scythe. 26 health on the opposing side. He has Korkron, Inner Rage, Shield of Honor, and 1 Bloodsworn Mercenary, which is a ton of damage. And he still has the tools to help out with this as well. He could even go Reaper's Scythe and say just Bloodboil Brute to kill the Armorsmith this turn and then start pushing damage phase.
I wonder if okasinnsuke was supposed to have the Bloodboil in the middle by the end of that turn. It's always it's something I always forget when playing around and against Reaper Scythe, but maybe a slight optimization missed.
I mean, it's a pretty big difference, right? To having to take, say, 5 versus 1. Like, that's huge.
True enough.
Oh, he's going to do... Oh, this is interesting. Okay. So, basically, at least for the moment, foregoing much higher burst damage for building a scarier board right now, which is fair because there aren't too many ways that this board you're expecting to see get cleaned up.
Yeah, I like the line. It always feels a bit awkward to leave the risky skipper at the end though, but it at least leaves it at 1 health, so at most it gets just 1 proc. And the amount of health on these blood boils means that they don't actually even need Divine Shield to be safe. So I like the line from Xiao Bai. Honestly, I would have done something like Reaper's Scythe plus the Shield of Honor, but that line would have used a combo piece anyway. So why not just get more of your minion presence and try and kill them that way?
And this is just 1 mana too slow, right? I'm not saying that Rattlegore would be the good play here if he could, but based on all the other options, it's better than nothing, and nothing is what this turn feels like right now, as it looks like it's going to be armor up, pass.
Feels awful, but okasinnsuke sort of clearly has a game plan of trying to stay alive next turn by going Risky Skipper, Armor Smith, and whatever other cheap minion he picks up, and then maybe something like Rattlegore
is that
with the
lethal?
room for rush, but that's not going to happen.
I was just going to say, with the Nitro boost and the weapon being there, how high attack it is, that just has to be right.
Yep.
Wow.
Even over lethal with the inner rage that he doesn't need to use. Very cleanly done by Xiao Bai, all off the back of going for minion presence that last turn. Pretty much just accelerated what was already, I believe, a mostly won game.
Yeah, that really was just good heads-up play and really good understanding of what his opponent was realistically capable of. And you can see there, if you looked at the deck count for both players, Xiao Bai just had all the card draw covered, right? And okasinnsuke just got stranded. Honestly, we saw that he had some combo pieces. There was the Broom, the Yogg Merchant, the Rattlegore was there, but a little bit too slow, of course. But there was just nothing else. Everything else was used up in defending. So really good point there for Xiao Bai to say, actually, there's not that many cards in hand. I could make this big scary board, even though it uses up the only Blood Swan Mercenary in the hand, but that ended up being more than enough to actually just get the job done.
Yeah, just recognizing that there is no Brawl in the opponent's list and that they would have to have pretty much exactly Barov and another activator because he still left... Sorry, there was a Risky Skipper on board, so technically there was already an activator for it, but if it were not Barov, this was pretty much lethal the very next turn instead of waiting to put together lethal from hand when it could have just easily been done via board. But really, I want to draw attention to that early turn from Xiao Bai where he used the super early Barov to get rid of a singular minion, and that pretty much opened the floodgates for him to be able to never lose control of the board from that point on.
Yeah, and that is a really tough play to make, especially if you're not super experienced, because everyone is so used to seeing Barov just wipe boards no matter the size, right? You look at, it's a great answer to the post Ysera portal turns, right? Where there's just minions of crazy sizes filling the opponent's board, and you just wipe it away with the Barov. And to make such an early call to say, actually, this one minion is probably more threatening than most of the things my opponent will do for the rest of the game, makes it worthwhile. And it was just really, really solid play, but it does look like okasinnsuke is going to be going with that rogue to go into this next game. And what do you think about this one brain freeze, Gia?
It's interesting. I've definitely seen 2 copies more often, just to have World Kick Master paired with a cheap reactive card, because World Kick Master, while it is a lot of value generation, sometimes you don't actually hit answers that you want to be using with it on the very same turn, or you end up having to use eviscerates that you would rather send to the face. So I've always been a fan of Brain Freeze in a meta where you think there's even more aggression on the other side. And because Xiao Bai's lineup is quite minion heavy and aggressive with that Zoo Warlock in there, maybe okasinnsuke would rather have had 2 copies.
Yeah, and even with this Paladin, right? Like, whatever, I think when Paladin does its best, it is that early minion, you know, you just get the God Curve of Aldor Attendant into a buff, into a 3-drop, into Truth Seeker, and having been able to just bat away one of those minions pretty easily with a Brain Freeze might be pretty valuable. But checking out this list, a big standout for me is just continuing to be the Crab Riders that I'm a huge fan of. I think time and time again, every time we see them played, they're getting good jobs done, whether it's drawing a lot of cards with Wisdom or just being a threat in itself with any damage buff. It's absolutely huge. And wow, Gia, this is one of those Paladin hands.
Oh my gosh, but look at the rogue hand.
I know.
Too. That is, this is insane. Okay,
I declare this a fair game, just because both players have like top tier mulligans.
I second that opinion. We get to see both decks operate at max power, and he has the hand of a doll as well.
Yep,
Even I am also a big fan of Crab Rider, especially after having tuned into the Japanese language stream briefly and hearing that the translation for this card is Kani Raida.
Oh, yeah.
It's great.
That's pretty sick. The mummy coming off the Pharaoh Cat, probably just the by far the worst thing we've seen in the hand for this whole game, because the hands are so good. But still, it won't even really affect him. He may as well just, a lot of the time, pretend that card doesn't exist, because the Foxy Fraud, Miscreant, Swindle's there, the Prize Plunderer to help, sort of bat back some of this early aggression. Wow.
Quite good, but I'm thinking this is a Foxy Fraud Eviscerate turn, because that one sticking minion early on is enough of a threat. You do not want to give Paladin easy targets for even more Librams, for Blessing of Wisdom. Just trade away everything that you can. It comes at the cost of one of his best combo activators in Foxy Fraud, but I think it's absolutely worth it. And you're right about the Generous Mummy. That card is absolutely unplayable in this matchup, where you can give them free pen flingers.
Yeah, it's also important as well that because he has the coin, this keeps the Miscreant extremely comboable.
Right.
I guess, right? So even though there's the Foxy Fraud being played out, I think I do agree the respect has to be given, where you don't lose control of the board so early in the game. But I actually would like to see the Miscreant come out now, even if it ends up being the Prize Plunderer used just to kill off this Zealot's Pride, because that board starts to look scary for Paladin. Miscreant, Foxy Fraud, and the Prize Plunderer there. That's pretty powerful.
Absolutely, I'm on board for that play. I guess if you get the Kobold Lackey, even better. You don't have to use Prize Plunderer in that case, but having that insurance of being able to kill the Salheads either way is great.
Oh, okay. Not the best overall with double Draconic Lackey, but still, I think, honestly, just the board presence is worth it in itself, as we can see.
It really is. I mean, Paladin, without inclusion of Consecration, as most of the Libram lists don't have it, really actually struggles with a bunch of small minions on the other side. They don't have the mana flexibility with Penflinger this often to outpace the development that Rogue gets, even if it's just 1 mana 1/1s the entire time.
And this is
a Crab Rider Libram Blessing here. It deals with the majority of the board, whether he wants to take 2 value trades on the Miscreant itself or kill off the other 2 minions. It's looking pretty good to me.
Yeah, I think this just does enough, right? He can do it this way, which I really like. Get the card draw first. You don't have to commit to Libram of Wisdom. For example, if he'd drawn the second Attendant, he could have played that and the Libram and had that payoff. So really nice order in there, but most importantly, it's just fighting back so the aggression doesn't take over from the Rogue.
Yeah, it was a small decision between whether you kill the quantity of minions or quality, in that being the one highest health minion versus the 2 others. But because he has Libram of Justice in hand, I completely agree that he should be narrowing the board instead of Sages keeping it wide but short.
And it also just reduced the most damage by far coming the other way, right?
Okay, okasinnsuke gonna start.
Okay.
Yeah, start with a value train. There's the head crack, all important card in the matchup, in any matchup, truly.
It just always gets there.
Indeed. Where have I heard that before?
No clue. I thought of it just now. This is a tough call, and I was saying this like mere moments ago, it feels like, to Lorinda, is any time I've experimented with leaving a whirl kick up, I've always regretted it, But whenever you have to do a turn like this, it feels like you've missed out just a little bit. That maybe the turn could have been more powerful if you didn't have to mess around killing this minion. But I do respect the decision to just get rid of it here and now.
Oh, amazing. He got budget Penflinger in Elven Archer, which kind of means that he's not forced to play Libram of Wisdom, because it's actually a really big deal, because originally I think Xiao Bai was thinking about killing the Whirl Kick with 2 Penflings, but to put the Penflinger back in your hand at the end of that, you would have to commit the Libram, which means not playing the Salhead. So by getting the Elven Archer here, he's able to keep his card draw going and develop the Salhead as well.
Yeah, and that's a big deal because pretty soon he will need those brooms, I think. Not only because he has Lord Barov, but just in general to fight back, because you already know this isn't one of those games where the rogue sort of whiffs on its generation. Look at the size of Okasinnsuke's hand. It is insane. He can do whatever he wants this turn.
And it could be a questing, even though I guess it's really just backstab that you would get to play with it, because there's no target he absolutely wants to Shadow Step at the moment. So Okashinsuke gonna start with one of the Draconic Lackeys instead. Dagger and take some value trades. This is a very slow approach from Rogue, and that's when it starts to get a little bit worrisome, because the more time you give the Paladin to find their Libram discounters, the bigger a swing they can get with playing Libram of Justice and a Libram of Hope and a board clear on the same turn.
It's okay though, he has head crack. That just will get there eventually, so he can take it slow.
How could I forget?
Yeah, exactly. So the 2 brooms are in hand now for Xiao Bai, so he does have that flexibility in how he can deal with anything on the board. Another
Elven
juggler.
So we could see like Elven Archer plus Penflinger on the 3-2, and he can Libram his Loot Hoarder. But then I actually think he might run into hand space problems, because the Loot Hoarder would essentially have 2 cards given on dying, if that's the line.
It's such a weird hand, isn't it? There's a lot of stuff for Xiao Bai, but none of it's
His
that
top
great
deck.
until he got the Hand of Ador, which is absolutely fantastic. Now he can follow up with that Elven Archer, clean up the board, and have something to show for it afterwards.
The Elven is so good. It's Penflinger that lets you not worry about hand space. I'm sorry I called it budget.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to worry about hand space because you never get it back, though. So
Exactly.
I think calling it budget is at least relevant.
Well, questing doesn't really get that much value here unless he wants to like Shadow Step a Draconic Lackey, which I'm not a big fan of. The very slow play is just evasive trade broom, dagger down the Elven, but that feels far too slow.
So many options.
What if...
I think it's
I actually don't mind that. I actually don't mind the dragon, you know.
Really?
Because it's kind of weird for him to deal with the 3 health on the dragon. It's a good chunk of damage, and nothing else this turn feels that good. That's my worry.
It's true. I mean, it does take a fair amount of Penflings to do everything,
Right.
but I feel like his window to get a strong questing is closing. I was honestly looking at questing, eviscerate, Draconic Lackey. You can decide afterward if you want to Shadow Step it, and even though the Evis overkills, it gives him just more aggression as soon as possible. I'm worried that Okashinsuke won't have time.
It's a real tough one, isn't it? Because of the sheer volume of cards Xiao Bai has actually managed to draw this game. The questing, I think, already feels too late, so you may as well just whip it in as good a turn as you can. And I think that wouldn't have been good enough. I think whenever you play questing, you want to just force out a Libram, or the Barov, of course.
Yeah.
And maybe it wouldn't have been
That's fair.
big enough to do that, so that's why he's holding on to it.
That's fair. And in the grand scheme of things, because Xiao Bai only had the 1 reduction on his Libram, it's actually not that easy to fling away this 5-3.
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem, isn't it? And also, if
kind of-
this soaks the second broom, you're extremely happy if you Okassinsuke,
For sure,
right?
yeah. I mean, it in effect here is doing what I thought the questing would do anyway, which is bait out the first Libram, and you know, upside of that, he has a questing in hand. So the way this turned out, absolutely the evasive worm was good here. But I mean, it was hard to make that call for sure.
Yeah. And he's retained more flexible cards, right? He still has Eviscerate, Backstab, Shadow Step. He's still got all those tools available. And I am, wondering if the head crack ever is going to come out to play pretty soon, because we're getting to that point where he has the mana for it, and he also doesn't necessarily have the way to spend all the mana very efficiently right now, with only a single 2/2 on the board.
I think this has got to be the questing turn now. I can see the head crack getting stuff done towards the end game, but this is a very crucial window where Xiao Bai, if you give him all the freedom in the world, is gonna drop an 8/8 Divine Shield taunt next turn. He's also okasinnsuke has also just seen one Libram of Justice, so now's as good a time as any to try and get a big threat out there. Fei Wing and Backstab. Sorry, the Fei Wing does not fit this turn. That was not Draconic Studies, but Draconic Lackey.
Choose soon.
Yeah, it's actually a really nice turn for questing, because okasinnsuke will know that Libram of Hope will cost 8 right now.
Exactly.
So if Xiao Bai wants to play it, oh yeah, that's really nice actually. The Shadow Step on the World Kick I really like, and it's less...
Yeah.
Although it obviously helps buff the questing, it's more about retaining the World Kick for future use. It's all looking good.
I would actually say it's the other way around, where it's a bigger deal to buff the questing, and the upside is you retain the World Kick, because obviously if it's not gonna end on the board anyway, you would rather Shadow Step any other minion that has a battle cry, but it just wasn't an option for okasinnsuke, so might as well take the banked mana on Whirlwind, and that does draw out the second Libram of Justice, which is a headache for okasinnsuke, but he at least knows now that if there's going to be another questing like this one, it is much more likely to stick.
I really like the Flick here, though. I think there just isn't a better target than Truthseeker for Flick, because it means that this reduction on the Librams, mainly the Libram of Hope, of course, isn't going to get silly cheap, where, a late Liadrin means you can get like Liadrin, and then the next turn could be like double Libram of Hope easily with mana to spare.
Yeah, I do think this is a Flick as well. In terms of Flick using its additional effect of getting rid of other copies, Truthseeker is absolutely the best target for it, because they're never going to leave a Penflinger naked. Libram of Hope being the singular biggest card that you want to remove with an effect like Flick doesn't get that bonus of deleting the other Libram of Hope, because you only get rid of the minion. But here now, Xiao Bai. Yep. Xiao Bai has so much value now from having both of the Librams of Wisdom, and he gets the minion presence on top of it. Things are getting scary for okasinnsuke.
Yeah, this is the point in a Paladin game where, as the opponent of the Paladin, you realize that the game's slipping away very quickly, because you're taking this damage every turn, or the Penflingers are killing the minions you're playing to try and contest the board that already exists, and it feels like everything the Paladin does from this point doesn't cost the Paladin anything, whereas you're there trying to stick minions, trying to do some damage, trying to get some removal, and it's very, very difficult at this point. So okasinnsuke definitely has a lot of work to do here.
And I think his only good quote-unquote way of dealing with this 8/8 is trying to rip the other Prize Plunderer off of Secret Passage. It's a lot to ask for, but otherwise this 8/8 is going to stick around.
And I do feel that's the way you play Secret Passage, right? Is say, oh, I need this card. This card is not in my hand. I'm going to play Secret Passage, and it's reasonably likely I get it.
I'm surprised that he didn't just play the free World Kick Master, though, because if it's not going to be Prize Plunderer, if it needs to be Prize Plunderer anyway, why not just buff the Prize Plunderer and the questing by getting another minion played out there? And as it turns out, I forgot to talk about Brain Freeze, which was the other out here. Great outcome for okasinnsuke, all things considered.
Yeah, that freeze effect is going to be a big deal, not only pinging off the Divine Shield, but just making this 8/8 not be able to swing. And definitely not the best Jandice I've ever seen, but the 5/4 Divine Shield again is going to help just soak up more hits from Penflingers and just more time than anything else. Oh, wow.
Did you catch whether that was the Illusion minion? Because against a deck that plays Penflinger, I would still end up putting the Illusion on the lower health minion, despite the Divine Shield kind of pseudo-protecting.
Yeah, I'm like 99% sure it's the 5/4 that's safe. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, cool. And Xiao Bai Picks up the other Libram of Hope, and he can rush it to deal with the questing. Oh my goodness, this is too much. It's too much. Doesn't even need to heal his face.
Yeah, I like it. What's the rogue going to do to get through? Are there even cards that realistically are going to exist to get through this wall? I don't think there is.
Head crack, Raven.
Yeah, head crack and a lot of generated frost novas from somewhere.
Yeah.
Spin like the sun.
Well, it's gonna have to be some miracles off of this World Kick Master. Maybe Kidnapper is actually decent here. One Thief definitely on the higher end of outcomes. Okay, another Eviscerate. That's good. Missile's cheapest.
Yeah, for a second I was going to say, well, the spell reduction could be good, depending on what's left in his deck. But with 7 cards, spending 2 mana on that is probably not going to cut it. Wait a minute.
What if he just makes a bigger guy instead of
Yeah,
dealing
what if he gets
with
like
their big guys?
Devolving Missiles, for example? Be crazy.
Off of one Thief? That would be
Yeah.
insane.
And then he just plays Van Cleave. Oh.
But I guess he just takes the cheapest card here, Missiles, and then you go like Nitro Boost Edwin, and hope that that's enough. You can see Xiao Bai has Lord Barov, but if he has to do that to get rid of Edwin, then okasinnsuke is happy because he has this Arcane Explosion. Okay, ends up taking the Icicle instead. Deal 2 versus Missiles. I guess you just want the more guaranteed damage at this point.
There's a Kidnapper.
Whew. Oh, this is such a painful barrel for Xiao Bai. It really is. If he's a greedy boy, he can say, I have 2 taunts. Maybe I don't need to do it, but Kidnapper is such a big fear in that case.
Like the
Getting
trade, of
wisdoms
course.
off
Yeah.
of this is really good.
Yeah, one of the things you can do when you're against Paladin sometimes is purposely make the buffed minion not be able to trade off, so the Librams kind of get stuck on the board and not able to utilize these pen flingers. So I do like that. Just get it gone, utilize the mana. Yes, he lost a minion that had a decent amount of attack, but he's gained all that back from being able to do this turn, so worthwhile in the end.
And crucially, he does just put the big minion at higher than 1 health, so the rogue isn't able to simply dagger it away, although they don't want to face tank that at that point. And I like the optimization of putting the other Libram on any minion but the one that already has it to kind of play around sap effects.
It's Icicle, though. It's actually kind of perfect.
Yeah, Icicle on Barov into Arcane Explosion deals with everything but the Crab Rider, which he can then just, you know, swing into.
Yeah.
And you always kind of feel a bit scared to give back those Librams, knowing that there's double Penflinger in hand. But on the flip side, that is their entire hand. And the most damage that Xiao Bai can output in a single turn is less than 10 for sure, because he needs to spend mana on creating a target for the Librams before he goes off with the Penflingers.
I mean, I think unless Lady Liadrin comes down next turn, okasinnsuke definitely has a chance here. I think there's only Lady Liadrin, because obviously it would generate not only the Librams of Hope, but way more Libram of Wisdoms too. Then I think he's still very much in this game.
I mean, it's scary because like Xiao Bai can just set up technically from what he can see 2-turn lethal, but that's why the pickup of this devolving missiles is so huge. Technically, it also could have just been Kidnapper, but you know, one is cheaper than the other and allows him to fit in both Cold Blood and Head Crack after all is said and done. Xiao Bai has this only 1 play. The only question is whether he wants to put a Libram on 2 separate minions, and I guess you absolutely do here to play around Sap once again.
But Devolving Missiles is just perfect for this kind of scenario. Because it is very unlikely that it's only going to hit 1 minion, right? And even worst case, as you mentioned, there is the Kidnapper as backup.
But he's still on a clock here because if Xiao Bai hits even just a regular spell, 2 turns in a row, that's still Penflinger lethal. So okasinnsuke needs to be quite scared indeed. And there's also just the possibility of top decking Liadrin at any point, like you said. The one consolation, I suppose, is that Xiao Bai's not running. Oh, he is running, rather, one copy of Libram of Judgment.
Yes.
So that's also something to be afraid of.
Yeah, I imagine there's a strong consideration here for getting this miscreant down, because if you can get Titanic Lackey, then that's going to be really nice, just to at least take something off the danger box, right? To be like, okay, well, I'm marginally safe versus the weapon. Okay, that's one thing. Next.
Okay, he actually goes for... Oh, no! I was going to say looking for a taunt off of this to play around exactly that Libram, but that is such a disaster now. Okashinsuke's own counter game plan of racing Xiao Bai is significantly dampened by this Doomsayer.
If he'd done that first, obviously this is just silly world we live in now, but he can't even like rush it into an enemy minion to kill it off, right?
Right.
Because in some worlds he could like cold blood an enemy minion and then rush it in so it would die, but the minions aren't big enough. So.
Oh my gosh, he did the forbidden play. He did the mummy, which means like any spell is just immediately lethal here. I guess Xiao Bai says, I don't care if you have a spell, I'm dead over 2 turns anyway, because this Doomsayer is blowing up my board, so I can kind of see it. But it's just funny how it panned out. So Xiao Bai goes base. Oh, actually the mummy's sick because of the reborn.
I was just going to say, it does survive through Doomsayer, so not only is it a huge threat right now, it's a threat post-Doomsayer to push even more damage. So it is very, I think it's a very good play, because at this point, you just accept that if there's, you know, Liadrin or Libram or whatever drawn, well, you've lost, right? There's literally nothing you can do to change it. So do things that will maybe make the circumstances where it isn't a spell a little bit better.
No, that's exactly right, Raven. Okashinsuke there is just saying, I know your 2 cards in hand. They're pen flingers. I am not going to assume you draw something good off the top, because I would be dead in 2 turns either way. So he actually found the one extremely fringe situation where playing Generous Mummy against Libram Paladin is legal and good.
I'm not sure what the cards are he has left, but with his current hand, Secret Passage is looking pretty good. I imagine it is going to be Lackey Headcrack Secret Passage.
Yes, probably. And he kind of wants to not play every card off the Secret Passage anyway, because he would then start fatiguing after the turn's done. Oh, he starts with this. Okay. It's really hard to parse all of the decisions here, if there is any Discover effect like there is in this one Thief.
Oh, Pharaoh Cat too. That could be a huge deal.
Yeah. Magic Trick. I think he really wanted Pyroblast here even. If Fireball wasn't immediately lethal, and it was... It's not, sorry. The mummy can't attack. My favorite card. Another head crack. Let's go.
Boom.
Okay, he's just gonna step here. He really wants Frostbolt, I assume, to play around Libram of Judgment.
Or even a Secret's potentially okay, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
But it still remains that any spell for Xiao Bai is lethal here.
Wait. I guess it's more damage?
It is, yeah.
I'm just wondering whether, like, it's also one less card in the deck. Which means he's nearly at fatigue anyway.
Yeah, I think fatigue minus this 1 tick doesn't matter, because game's over next turn either.
Sure, you're right.
Should be.
You are right.
Actually, I don't... Maybe I'm just not right, because Xiao Bai has this option to go for board control instead.
Reporting for duty.
I guess,
This is
but,
so weird.
but either way, these devout pupils would finish the game no matter what, right? I guess if that was barrier, not necessarily.
Right, yeah. It also depends what the secret is. Xiao Bai could also be thinking it's counter spell, and that's why he's happy, or not happy, but he's deigned to play out these pen flingers for not bounce back into the hand. He says they're more relevant on the board, and they absolutely are. So backstab, kidnapper, headcrack, rush, lackey.
It looks like all he can do to me. As long as he kill these 2 pen flingers, there's still a minimal chance, right?
He clears the whole board.
Yeah.
And then he takes 1 tick. He can take 2 ticks of fatigue from his perspective But again, any Libram of Judgment 1 and 3 to be drawn at this point for immediate lethal. And even if it's not that, the Devout Peoples are kind of...
And also, the Liadrin can get Hand of a Doll, which will also draw another card, right? If he wants to go for the weapon.
Oh, that's the worst one. But I think Xiao Bai still has this. He just can't get through the pupils, right? At most, it's just one that he can deal with.
Correct.
I can't believe this game has actually gone to fatigue.
I would have loved to have seen the Blessing of Wisdom that turn. It would have given him an extra minion, but he would draw a card, right, if he attacked with it, so it just would have been funny because it's Spellbender. That is going to be the game. Xiao Bai gets the win there, and that was so close. And honestly, I think there might have been points throughout that game where things could have been different, small decisions could change, of course, but I think overall both players were doing a pretty good job of working out just exactly how to get the most out of the cards they had left to try and win that game, because that was... It looked actually like it ended up being trickier than it looked like it would earlier on. It looked pretty straightforward, but that got nutty towards the end.
It was all off the back of that Doomsayer, and I really have to feel for okasinnsuke because we always talk about the meme of how Faceless Lackey into Doomsayer can ruin almost any game plan, but this is happening on what I believe is okasinnsuke's first top 8 in a Master Tour. It's happening on his chance to get points towards Grandmasters, and if that were not the outcome of the Faceless Lackey, and knowing what we know about Xiao Bai's draw order, which was Liadrin and Libram of Judgment at the bottom 2, okasinnsuke had that game in the bag. He would have had a 2-turn lethal clock easily set up, but the Doomsayer messed that plan up. He did his best to adapt to it by playing the smartest Generous Mummy I've ever seen, but unfortunately, it was not enough in the end.
Yeah, and you can see it on the replay, right? Imagine that Doomsayer being literally any other minion in the game, a relevant minion, of course. There's no way that Xiao Bai could have cleared that board. He could have started trying to defend, but it just wouldn't have been enough on like 11, 12 health, whatever he was on at the time. So really, really close game there. But it does mean Xiao Bai is only one Warlock win away from moving on to then get into that top 4 today later on. So huge deal here, because I think Warlock is doing very, very good at the moment. There is just my only question in deck building of I would love to see 2 Cult Neophytes, because I just think they're that good that you want 2 of them. But there is one in there, and there is the addition of the Soulfire, which we've not seen everyone bring, and is that extra stretch of damage that if you don't bring that, your opponent pretty much has like 100% information almost all the time about what kind of extra reach from hand you have.
And Raven, I do agree with you on average that Cult Neophyte is probably a good call for this meta, but specifically against okasinnsuke's 2 remaining decks in Warrior and Rogue, it's perhaps not quite as impactful. Maybe Rogue every now and then just making all of their 0-cost spells not playable together on the same turn is relevant, but I would say hardly so against Warrior. And so I do think okasinnsuke still has a good chance with his Warrior compared to the Rogue, and Cult Neophyte aside, just how the decks are built, right? Warrior has more removal, it has Warmaul Challenger to deal with some of the early threats and stick a minion on board, whereas if Rogue runs into one of those crazy zoo starts of like 3 minions, turn 1, that is pretty much game, set, and match.
Yeah, it can be really tough, and even just stepping back to the Warrior very quickly, even like 1 Sword Eater can be a bit of a problem for Zoo, right? Because the combination of the high health taunt and the weapon. So there are a lot of good tools there for the Warrior, but you know, we'll get to see pretty shortly what the first Q is going to be. But still, I think Xiao Bai is in a really good spot, and I think he's done a good job of keeping a lid on some of these more crazier moments and crazier outcomes in terms of just exactly what to do, even to the extent of, we saw earlier, it might have been a small thing, but just playing the Penflingers out and leaving them there and saying they probably don't die, even though there's obvious favor for Xiao Bai to win purely because he's 2-1. You know, what are you actually putting okasinnsuke's chances at for winning this series, Gia? You have faith?
Definitely below 50%. I mean, I have faith. Anything can happen, right? If Faceless Lackey can summon Doomsayer and Generous Mummy can be correct against Libram Paladin at any point in the world, then there is a chance. But I think that the Rogue struggles in the first place against Zoo. Maybe not as hard as it would if it drew other hands than this, which are quite strong. Foxy Fraud and a removal card. But on top of that, Okashinsuke has to win twice, so obviously it's going to be tough. But that's a good way of getting started for sure.
Yeah, were you surprised at the brain freeze throwaway there from okasinnsuke? Because to me, that card alone, dealing 3, lines up so well versus a lot of the threats you were worried about in Zoo, early game at least.
Yeah, at first it looks a bit weird, but in terms of how Okashinsuke's mana allocation works, he is probably looking to go Coin, Foxy Fraud, and then either of those 1-drop combo cards. So if you're going Coin, Foxy into Prize Plunder, it's actually just 1 damage less than Brain Freeze, plus you get to keep the body. So I don't mind his mulligan whatsoever.
Okay.
This could be like an early Flame Imp Wicked Whispers here. You discard the other Wicked Whispers, but the curve still works out, right? He has Manari on the next turn.
That's it, yeah. I mean, you could think, okay, hold on for later, get a bigger Wicked Whispers, but this way not only just makes the bigger board right now, allows a value trade, but just puts the demon down. So these life taps and self-damage from the Flame Imp, if it lives, will get basically recovered with the help of that Manari.
Ooh, starting to get spicy for Okashinsuke. I think this turn will just be Dagger and chill because the Prize Plunder gets a lot better next turn. Alternatively, he could just use the prep as more buff for the Prize Plunder and get rid of the Flame Imp right now. And then he kind of says, okay, my Foxy Fraud dies. But my problem with that line is the follow-up is very weak. It's like Dagger.
Almost non-existent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough, and honestly, I had to just double check there that, oh yeah, we're only on 2 mana at the moment. It's just you forget how much Zoo can do with not a lot of mana at the moment, so it's looking pretty powerful.
We could see, instead of Foxy even, is like Whirl Kick, Coin, Prize Plunder.
Oh, sure.
Or like Coin, Prep, Prize Plunder, deal with the Flame Imp, and you can say, in most worlds, my Whirl Kick gives me a follow-up with the Foxy Fraud on the next turn. But again, it's all not guaranteed. So Okashinsuke going for our first instinct here. Gonna take a lot of damage, but hopefully get a bigger swing out of it.
Yeah, Flick, not exactly what he's looking for right now, and Xiao Bai has that either the second Manari Mosha for next turn, or depending on draw, of course, could go tap Wriggling, but either way, Xiao Bai just has enough to keep on piling on the pressure for now.
The order on this is super tricky. You could say prep first, and then Prize Plunder, but I think this works out because Foxy Fraud also gives you a conditional discount. As it so happens, whether it was Prep or Foxy Fraud, the next card was not playable, but the important thing is Okashinsuke got enough buffs on the Prize Plunder prior to playing it to kill the Flame Imp.
This looks like it could end up being the Voidwalker horror turn. Just because having extra attack on the single minion just doesn't seem to achieve much. It's not like Xiao Bai setting up lethal with a big face attack. So yeah, I do like this a lot.
Yeah, the 1 extra attack buff on the Voidwalker is super relevant here as well. So one of the cases where you don't spend all your mana. And this turn is not that bad here. It's Shadow Step, Foxy Fraud into Kidnapper. I mean, the Foxy doesn't get to attack immediately, but I'm okay with that. Like, he kidnaps the Voidwalker, I assume, and then just daggers down the Wriggling Hoarder.
Yeah, so although I'm not sure if I like it as a play in just isolation, there's not much else to do. So I think I prefer it than just re-daggering up. So yeah, I think I'm with you on this. It just looks good enough. And then there's 5 into 6 with Jandis into Flick, or whatever option. So this is just a not fantastic turn to lead into much better turns than a bit of a solid mid game. So yeah, I am behind this.
It's the most defensive play by far, and there was a small consideration of sapping the Manari instead, but you leave a Voidwalker in that case, and your dagger also doesn't have a target. So I think this is definitely the smartest way to approach it. Xiao Bai has Flesh Giant, but it feels a bit
just
slow.
already dead in most circumstances. He can trade the Manari away, but again, then that's a bit of a problem as well.
Yeah, I definitely prefer this. You can tap and still fit in the Manari, and you can ship it face. Alternatively, Voidwalker Cult Neophyte, and he could take a value trade. I'd hear the argument for that.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't mind Voidwalker Neophyte trade the Foxy Fraud.
Yeah. So in terms of the shape of minions that creates, the Void Walker itself is the bigger problem here because, well, actually, the Kidnapper gets to trade over it, but then the dagger would have to take more damage by killing the Munari. The theoretical dagger, that is.
What makes something real?
Ugh. Oh,
He wishes he played the Wasteland Assassin.
in a long time. Not the worst I've ever seen, because there's been a few tweets of double Chromatic Egg or Chromatic Egg plus Desert Obelisk. But you know what? It still might just be enough here, because Xiao Bai definitely looking at Flesh Giant this turn, and that gets flicked into tomorrow. Oh, what a painful flick this will be.
And this again, Flick being a tech card, I know Derek was saying yesterday he was a fan of, because some rogue players aren't playing Flick, and when you like look at a turn like this, you just wonder why. And there are reasons. It's just when you hit the sweet spot and be able to just decimate your opponent with one turn, it's actually pretty nutty.
Yeah, I think this turn seals the coffin for Xiao Dai. It's gonna be so difficult for him to come back, even outside of there being minions on board for okasinnsuke. It's just, he's not even close to dealing a burst-type lethal.
Even Prep Swindle on top of this turn means that there's plenty of resources left after this Flick's played. There's so much flexibility in how we can approach this, and that is backbreaking.
I actually don't know if the Prep Swindle is necessary. Like, this is a very, very small thing, but Flick is like 100% going to be the play this turn, right? And so if your next top deck is Questing Adventure, say, then you would rather have the Prep Swindle after that. I don't know. Maybe there's some fringe scenarios where you get a good enough Swindle that Prize Plunderer can do the job, but I am nitpicking. This game is pretty much already won for okasinnsuke, and it's going to go all the way down to Game 5.
Yeah, Hand of Gul'dan, well, just the worst draw this turn, right? It's unplayable. So yeah, definitely the worst draw. Although you think sometimes, oh, Hand of Gul'dan could dig me out of this problem. Not if the problem's, a turn late, right? It's just going too quickly here for Xiao Bai.
I wonder.
And there's that question of, do I waste the battle cry on the Munari? And I think absolutely yes, because you're never going to get the battle cry to grow off from this point. Okashinsuke is going to take every value trade that he can, keep the board absolutely clear, while he proceeds to set up a 2-turn lethal. Just like Wasteland Foxy Brain Freeze.
Yeah, I think spend mana is my professional opinion on this turn for okasinnsuke. Just spend mana, do stuff, don't pass, and you'll probably be fine.
You can use the egg. You can free up the board space with the egg, but you know what? I don't think okasinnsuke is ever playing an unnecessary Faceless Lackey ever again. So it's probably like Goblin Lackey Brain Freeze Dagger here. Goblin on the Foxy, Brain Freeze, the 1/3. Sure, this works too. He can ignore the Jailer altogether. It's not scary at all with both Munaris having been used.
Or value trade it with the Faceless. I think he actually ended up locking in there, yeah. Why not? As long as the Zoo player just doesn't have any board, you pretty much will win the game.
Yeah, there's just no comeback mechanism other than the Broom, but I mean, not enough minions to go with it. Well, you can Broom first.
Yeah, you can Broom Soulfire, get the draws, and still have some mana left over.
And the Soulfire has to go on the Flick, I believe, for him to survive on board.
And then magically draw a Hellfire that just definitely isn't there.
Uh-huh. Inventing Hearthstone rules now, I love it.
Yep.
Oof.
And that's going to be the concede. No real surprise based on how the mid-game of that one went. Again, though, we did just see Xiao Bai just does like to play out even, you could say, a few more turns than you would on ladder, I suppose, and that is completely reasonable in a tournament setting, of course. But he does like to just see, okay, what were my next few cards, you know, that sort of scenario. And we are going to be going all the way down to this Warlock versus Warrior Gia, so I guess this has now flipped on its head a little bit, and okasinnsuke looks to me like he could really get this job done. This Warrior is capable of just dispatching Zhu pretty straightforwardly.
I mean, no bias whatsoever for the APAC region player, but I kind of feel for okasinnsuke because I do think in most situations that Paladin game where the Doomsayer was generated was supposed to end in okasinnsuke's favor. Again, I mean, you could make the argument that Xiao Bai had the worst possible end game order of draws, so it could have been his game as well. Both players, honestly, just such high quality of play this series that either of them would be extremely deserving to move on in this top 8. But okasinnsuke with the partial reverse sweep would be quite a fun story indeed.
It really would, and just a reminder, if you are, say, just tuning in, this is match number 2 of our top 8, and we are in our final game of the series, and it is going to be the Warrior for okasinnsuke, and it is going to be the ETC Warrior. So again, I've seen this combo go off, of course, this weekend, but I've not actually cast it. I think the closest I got was, I think it was okasinnsuke doing it for like 4 damage because it was just the one ETC and like one other minion or something crazy. So I'm ready for fireworks, but again, I fear we won't see it in this matchup because it probably just won't come down to it. It'll come down to whether he can clear the Zhu board and then keep on top of that and just stop the aggression coming out from Xiao Bai.
Completely agreed, Raven. But if anything, that serves to highlight why this warrior archetype is so popular. Maybe not the most popular archetype in the tournament as a whole, but I am definitely a fan of it because it has the tools to deal with decks like Zhu, and it has the tools to deal partial OTKs like you were mentioning. Right. However, the cost of running all these different packages and the Rattlegore version is that you are less consistent in doing any one of those individual game plans. So if okasinnsuke hits the half of his deck that is overly greedy with the Rattlegores and the Bloodsworn Mercenaries, but none of the reactive things like Warmal Challenger or the early weapons, then he could be in some trouble. But already I'm seeing a Sword Eater, which is very, very good against Zhu, like you said.
Yep, saw the in the at least pre-mulligan here for okasinnsuke, and Xiao Bai does have hold of that Hand of Gul'dan as these one keep in his opening hand. He even threw away the Neophyte, which I do agree with. You mentioned earlier that Neophyte not quite as powerful against Warrior as it is against a lot of the other decks at the moment. But overall, both players having pretty solid opening hands.
Yeah, okasinnsuke also holds onto the Corsair Cache, which can get him the Ankar or the Reaper Scythe, both of which are very good in this matchup because Ankar draws you towards Risky Skipper, which is both a board clear and often a way to buff up your health with the armor, and the Reaper Scythe can deal with up to 3 minions at once. Not the greatest start ever for Xiao Bai in terms of pressure. This is a lackluster wriggling horror, but I think the fact that he has Raised Dead means that he would rather just play out minions as opposed to tapping.
Right, at worst, if these are cleaned up, he can get a Tour Guide free live tap again, which keeps the resources flowing. And now he's going to go into that Nightshade Matron draw 3 cards turn, which is pretty nice, honestly.
Not quite guaranteed yet because of the cost on the Flesh Giant, but if he really needs to, he can raise that first to guarantee the Matron. It depends, though, on how many minions, if at all, die this turn, which okasinnsuke has to think about himself. I would just go Warmal on the wriggling here. Seems really powerful, and he... Oh, on the Voidwalker instead. Interesting.
I guess just wants to get rid of the taunt, right? Because the problem with the taunt is if he may feel the need to actually go Reaper Scythe, then he won't want the taunt to dictate where the cleave can go, maybe, is what he's thinking, as an extreme, even though I imagine it will be Sword Eater next turn.
No, that's a very good point. the Reaper Scythe is probably one of the best swing mechanics Okashinsuke has. The unfortunate downside of that trade is this walks perfectly into Xiao Bai's game plan of 1, have 2 minions dead so that he gets max value out of the raised dead, and 2, play the raised dead so that he can guarantee the matron discards the Hand of Gul'dan instead of the Flesh Giant, and also the matron perfectly kills off the Warlock challenger. Kind of funny how perfectly that all works out,
Right.
but at the worst, Okashinsuke can still just Reaper Scythe away both these minions. It kind of wastes the coin, but I want to be defensive here.
I actually think it's better if he Reaper Scythe doesn't coin, because then he has cleave for next turn, right? He can still kill the matron.
True.
He just takes 2 damage, which you'd rather not, but it's fine. And then next turn he can have the activation with, I don't know, whatever he wants and coin to activate it, guaranteed. So I actually do like Reaper Scythe, but I like holding onto the coin this turn.
It's a very close decision. I would say it's more than a difference of 2 damage, because if you do the cleave this turn, like you kill the matron by only taking 2, whereas if you swing the matron...
Sure, you're right, you're right.
But in the end, Okashinsuke goes for option number 3, which is Sword Eater. Put a taunt in the way of the matron and try to get usage out of the coin a little bit better later, which is honestly a very bold play. Gets mega punished by second matron, but it is not here at the moment.
Yeah, I imagine that Xiao Bai really wishes his giants were just 1 mana cheaper right now, because if he could giant rush with the broom, kill the taunt, and push additional 5, that would be so good for him.
There was still a play like, say, Darkglare, Wriggling, and Broom to rush that way, but it's kind of a expensive use of both the Broom and the Darkglare. Honestly, though, I kind of like the look of it. The biggest downside was that he doesn't get to fit in tap, so the giants are that much farther away. So I completely still understand this kind of halfway point where he develops a bit, tries to get the giants a bit more streamlined for the next turn, but this is not the greatest outcome to get off of the card draw.
Yep, and he did have options there as well. Spirit Jailer Voidwalker, for example, but did choose to go for that the Wriggling Horror. So it means that the Dark Glare can't just be weapon swung into to be cleanly killed, which is something. But you could argue that a Voidwalker would have achieved the same thing anyway.
True. And the Scythe is so good here. Even if the rest of what you do with the coin mana is play a tempo ETC, I think that's perfectly fine against Zoo.
Yeah, I think armor up after this turn would be perfectly fine. You know, if it's just press the armor up button and wait, because you've just wiped so much power from the board. I like it a lot.
It's wiping a lot of power, but I guess the other upside of Xiao Bai weaving in the taps is that Okashinsuke, this is far from the last board he has to worry about. He's thinking about the 2 Flesh Giants he still hasn't seen, which are likely to be in hand by this point. After using a swing of the Scythe, it is extremely hard to get rid of those. But I don't know, the Scythe looks too good to me here.
Well, the problem is, Xiao Bai won't need the Giants if he doesn't do something about this board, right?
Exactly.
So, like, you've got to do the first step, and it's, I guess he's going to keep hold of the coin and use the Inner Rage instead to activate the cleave. Either way, gets the job done.
This is very interesting. Inner Rage seemed somewhat valuable to me because he has the Bloodsworn and the other Warmaul challenger. I'm not sure what breakpoints the coin helps him achieve in the near future.
I was a little bit surprised. I think I would have ended up just coin armor up and say, well, 2 extra health versus Zoo is fantastic. Like, we'll see how it plays out, though. There you go, coin Blood Barber. That was it.
I mean, it's a clutch draw, even though it's probably going to be some risky skipper iteration of that instead. Obviously, the ideal is he wants to Blood Boil and copy all in the same turn. So how much mana does he need? If you go skipper, ETC, 5 damage minions on board means the Blood Boil costs 2. And then that's 5 mana spent, so he can not coin.
Yeah, it's one off, right?
Mercenary. What a shame. Because the Flesh Giant is super problematic.
So here's a new question.
Shoot.
Is there a world where he does a risky skipper turn, say with the Quartermaster and the ETC, right? which kills off the flame imp, and he just goes face with the weapon. and then try and force his Xiao Bai to trade, because he is leading in life. The risky skipper living isn't something that Xiao Bai will want. Oh, we can do this and trade. Okay.
Yeah, that is pretty smart. I did not see this, but I like where your head is at, where it was kind of partially setting up for an ETC lethal over 2 turns as well, but I guess in most circumstances, because okasinnsuke hasn't drawn into his own room, you'd still have to wait for some combo pieces and then get outpaced by the giant. So I think it was well warranted to go for the board clear, but
yeah.
I still think okasinnsuke's in a ton of trouble. Bladestorm, however, is a great pickup.
Yeah, it's just really tricky. The Warmall Challenger can help, but also it helps and doesn't help Bladestorm right now, because obviously he needs to deal with this 2-1, and then it ends up putting a minion that's not the right size on the board anyway. But you are right. I think okasinnsuke is just not quite getting there again. And I feel this isn't the first time it's happened with the CTC Warrior.
Yeah. Oh man, this is the trickiest Bladestorm puzzle I've ever seen. Is it even doable to end up Bladestorming only the Flesh Giant?
Wait. I think it's 1 health wrong with the Voidwalker, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at something on lines of Skipper, Warmall Challenger, the Giant. So the Warmall Challenger dies. And then with the weapon swing, but I think the Voidwalker actually ruins that, right?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. And so the alternative is there an alternative? It means he takes the 9 from the Flesh Giant, not necessarily dead the next turn, but across 2 turns almost certainly.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative is to remove everything else and make the Bladestorm maybe happen next turn.
Yeah, I like that compromise. And he can copy the Warmall in the meantime. But oh my goodness, is he close to dying? So 10s, 13 with Soulfire, I guess 14 if you include the Wicked Whispers.
Right.
It's going to be a Broom turn instead, and a very powerful one at that. Xiao Bai thinking, is there a guaranteed way to get my Wicked Whispers to discard Hand of Gul'dan? There's a 1 in 3 disaster outcome where it discards if the Soulfire discards the Wicked Whispers, but otherwise he gets a good Hand of Gul'dan activation.
Yeah, I like this like half compromise, because even if Soulfire now discards the Broom, then he can still Wicked Whispers the Hand of Gul'dan. So I do like leaving the Broom in hand for the Soulfire. It just gives him maybe an extra little way it can work.
Yeah, oh man, it's just so difficult to optimize, right? In the end, Xiao Bai just going for Wicked Whispers, the guaranteed outcome, where he knows he's not going to get any card draw, but he gets the best trades available. And I am actually kind of surprised by the Flesh Giant also trading. I thought he would trade literally everything else and send the 10 to face, but he's definitely set himself up a very sturdy board.
Ooh.
Oh my goodness, this top deck!
I was going to say, one thing you have to worry about when I was talking about earlier about ETC is that if there are already minions on your opponent's board, then the combos become deceptive, because as long as they have like ETC, Duplicate, and a Broom, then the minions you already have on board gain that rush, right? And then things can start happening. So maybe that was just some level of respect for saying, well, if he has no board and 3 cards, there's no way he can combo me down from 20, right? So, I think that might have been showing that a little bit of respect, but who shows 0 respect for anything? Lord Barov, because he is about to just laugh at this board right now.
Yeah, I mean, more so than that, it's the Bladestorm. I mean, I think Xiao Bai was thinking, if I just keep the board every turn from here on out, I'm safe, because he's seen both skippers. So even if there is a Barov, it's very hard for okasinnsuke to deal with the entire board. What he didn't account for is the perfect generated spell off of that previous Ethereal Lackey. And okasinnsuke now, I think it's absolutely warranted to just play out the ETC here. He had seen 1 Broom by that point, and yes, it's going to get cleared, but because he's only drawing 1 card per turn at the rest of this, it's safe to assume he's not getting the combo done. At this point, Okashinsuke's best draw is Rattlegore, probably. Xiao Bai has a lot of draws from Hand of Gul'dan. I don't know how much of this is actual gas, though, because 2 Flush Giants have been used. But okay, this is gas. It's a lot of gas.
That will do, I think.
There is so much untapped.
It fits in, he gets to basically draw his deck, like almost anyway. And also, because the deck will be almost empty, if this Canratha dies, it's almost going to be a straight into Prime for Xiao Bai.
Was it really kill that over the Cult Neophyte because of the Prime, like you said?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how he digs himself out. Like, what's he have to draw if Prime comes out now?
And it's like 2 chances to draw the Prime.
Yeah, exactly. He can tap.
Oh,
There
wow.
it is.
Yeah. I think Xiao Bai has this in the bag. There's no single draw for Okashinsuke that can do enough here. Even if he hits the cutting class, Barov is gone.
Gets the Rush Matron as well, so he can actually just push even more damage and basically say, well, you have to draw something pretty incredible this turn, because if you don't, you're just dead.
Has to be other Quartermaster into Ethereal Lackey into Brawl. I think that's the only out here. Oh!
Wait a minute. Not like this.
Not like this.
Nope.
Okay,
Nope. Actually,
that's the game.
not like this. So that's not going to be enough. There was a small glimmer of hope there, but that is going to be the game. There's the well played, and there's the self-sacrifice there. Sinsuke, is going to take the loss, and that means Xiao Bai takes the victory, and he is going to be moving on into top 4. Wow, honestly, Gia, that was a crazy series for many, many different reasons. I think good and bad, based on some of the outcomes and play that happened. So a pretty crazy one, but Xiao Bai did manage to fight back all the way, and that Zoo again, although it looked very close, doing enough to get the job done.
That was honestly such a nail-biter of a last match. Looking at it on paper, I felt like Warrior had the tools to kind of get there. Not the usual Warrior game plan of deal with every board consecutively, because like we saw there, it was really only the Barov that Okashinsuke had access to as a big board wipe. But by being the first to get on board with things such as Warmaul Challenger, but the early Nightshade Matron, was it? To get rid of the Warmaul Challenger, which also drew Xiao Bai Hand of Gul'dan, so he never ran out of resources, meant that Okashinsuke never had a good target for his Bloodsworn mercenaries to copy. It meant that he was playing catch-up from every single turn, and his best turn was this one right here, where he kind of reset the board with the Blood Boil Brute, but you could see the differential in terms of resources in hand, and Xiao Bai had enough taps, had enough Hands of Gul'dan to make sure that the pressure was consistent, and it finished all the way through to the end at the bottom of his deck. Really impressive stuff.